Welcome to our news channel. The economic, political, military, and diplomatic turmoil caused by the conflict between Ukraine and Russia turns into a nightmare from which the Kremlin will never be able to come back. The Russian people and the Russian army are most negatively impacted by this war, which was started by Vladimir Putin's ego and ambitions. As we entered the third phase of the battle in September, the losses suffered by the Russian army mounted like an avalanche. The Ukrainian army outclassed the Russians in the south and at Kherson for the entire month of August. The Russians were scared by the renowned raids of the Ukrainian HIMARS artillery and the Ukrainian Air Force. The Russians began to shift 12 battalions from the east to the south, once they recognized how dangerous Crimea was. This was the chance that Ukraine had been waiting for, and the Ukrainian armed forces began a massive, all-out onslaught against the Russian invaders, involving ground operations over the entire east and north. The Russian army suffered significant losses in the previous operation that the Ukrainian military conducted in the northeast. In particular, the tanks and armored vehicles the Russian army left behind when fleeing put them in a very bad situation. As a result of the attacks carried out with a plan that was carefully organized by Kiev, Putin's troops lost numerous valuable items. The Ukrainian soldiers' Kharkiv onslaught resulted in the liberation of roughly 400 areas in under 10 days. Over 70 intruders were slain and close to 100 were captured. Additionally, a recent report said that the Ukrainian military was encircling Russia's most significant Spetsnaz unit. The Kremlin propaganda stated in a statement that the Ukrainian armed forces were encircling the Russian Spetsnaz, Samara, and Bakhmut special raid reaction units in Balaklia in the Kharkiv region. The Russians were concerned when the Ukrainian military destroyed Russian outposts close to the town of Balaklia in the Kharkiv area. With the assistance of HIMARS artillery, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces surrounded the Russian Special Rapid Spetsnaz unit. One Ukrainian unit is believed to have captured the remaining Special Rapid unit. According to reports, this regiment, which is encircled by Ukrainian military troops, is a part of the Spetsnaz Special Forces. The Spetsnaz Special Forces, despite their extensive training and high cost, were unable to live up to any of Putin's expectations, which led to criticism of their actions in Ukraine for a long time. Those battalions have undoubtedly suffered the greatest setback since the day they were established in Ukraine. Even against Russia's most significant special forces, including the Spetsnaz, the Ukrainian military's superior capabilities prevailed. This is sufficient to make Putin crazy. But there are other explanations for why these units vanished. Because the majority of the Russian army's forces in this conflict were not even prepared. As a result, special forces had to complete the tasks that were often given to infantrymen. These forces, which have historically been regarded as the Russian army's elite, suffered considerable losses during the 6 months that Ukraine was under occupation. Experts say it will be difficult to replace all of these people in Russia, because they carried out the grubby work for the Russian army during the conflict. We could start by mentioning Spetsnaz special units, a favorite of Russian special forces. The collective designation for the Russian special forces is Spetsnaz. The Russian military created Spetsnaz, which means Special Purpose Unit, on October 24, 1950, to carry out special operations and reconnaissance, both during peacetime and armed conflict. They have much better equipment than regular infantry. On the battlefield, they may also be very effective against Russian soldiers. They have often demonstrated this. However, they suffered significant losses in Ukraine. The most recent investigations revealed the demise of 151 Spetsnaz Special Units servicemen. 33 of these soldiers are reportedly officers. Although these numbers do not accurately reflect the number of fatalities, they do allow us to at least roughly estimate how many special forces men defected from the Russian army units engaged in the conflict in Ukraine. The 22nd Guard Special Forces Brigade lost the most soldiers during the invasion of Ukraine, according to the published obituaries. 4 officers and at least 30 troops from the brigade perished. There are roughly 3 to 5 wounded Russian soldiers for every 1 killed during the conflict in Ukraine. Based on this information, it can be predicted that at least 130 members of the 22nd Spetsnaz Special Forces Brigade may be forced to leave the unit due to death or injury. Although the precise number of Special Forces units is secret, even conservative estimates suggest that the loss of 130 fighters may be equated to the total failure of one Special Force company. Other Spetsnaz special forces units experienced comparable losses during the Ukrainian conflict. At least 21 members of the 24th Guard Brigade were killed, including 4 officers. It is well known that the 3rd Guard Special Forces Brigade lost 28 men, including 5 officers. The loss of Special Forces officers is undoubtedly the most delicate and challenging problem for the Russian army to remedy. If regular experts are fired, another specialist warrior who arrives to take his place can be hired in a few weeks, occasionally between 1 and 2 months. Only an officer with the same military specialization can succeed a Spetsnaz Special Forces commander in death. Training a lieutenant with the necessary credentials and preparing them to run a company takes at least 4 years. To become a captain, a lieutenant must gather experience in advance for around 4 more years. As a result, a commander is prepared. Because raising people is a considerably more arduous process than generating weapons, compensation for the loss of this commander cannot even be compared to a tank or a fighter aircraft lost in the region after a total of 8 years of training. These casualties appear to be increasing as a result of the most recent attack, which forced the Russian army closer to Donbas by the Ukrainian military. Donbas is vulnerable to attack at any time. Particularly, it appears that the Russian presence in the Donetsk region will soon be fully eradicated. We continue to learn a lot of fascinating stuff from the reports that are published in the area. Russia revealed the bulk of Ukrainian servicemen in a statement. According to the officials chosen by Russia, there is more Ukrainian military than Russian ones. During a quick counteroffensive over the weekend, Ukrainian forces outnumbered Russian and pro-Russian fighters by 8 times, according to a statement from a Russian official stationed in Ukraine's Kharkiv area. Over the weekend, Ukrainian soldiers took control of the Russian supply hubs at Izhum and Kachinsky. Since being forced to retreat from Kyiv shortly after President Vladimir Putin ordered troops to be sent there, Russia has suffered its biggest military loss. In the north of the region, previously Russian-held towns have been taken by Ukrainian forces, according to a Russian official, and roughly 50 inhabitants had been evacuated to Russia. The border with the Belgorod region of Russia is currently closed, he continued, and the situation is becoming more challenging by the hour. On a map made public by the Russian Ministry of Defense on Sunday, it can be seen that Russian troops had nearly entirely evacuated the Kharkiv region. There is no reason for fear, according to a Russian official who observed a slower-moving offensive in the southern Ukraine area of Kherson, which is under Russian control and where Kyiv forces had made some progress in recent weeks. The Ukrainian advance in the Kherson region has accelerated as forces move closer to Kherson, according to a report released on Monday by the Institute for War Studies, a think tank based in the U.S. This comes after weeks of artillery bombardment of Kyiv's forces put a strain on Russia's supply routes across the Dnipro River. However, according to Russia's declarations, Kherson words won't be made public. They declare that they will never leave Kherson and claim to consider it as their city. Putin knows he has to keep Kherson. The sacking of Kherson may cause him to lose Crimea as well, but Putin will never give up on Crimea. For this reason, it will reveal great power, even though it is not possible to predict how far he can go. Everyone knows that Putin is reckless. Thanks for watching.